Texas, Pennsylvania, 20 southeast of Sparta. Developing line.
Sometimes I feel it's too bad a passenger is denied the view we have through the front windows. One night we were flying and Venus was hanging like a little jewel from the top of the moon. It was so spectacular. Those are the things that stay in the memory bank forever.
America's Flight 78, Dallas-Fort Worth to London, is about 2 hours from its destination. Having turned their ship over to trainee pilot Doug Joshua, for the moment pilots Hinton and Galt can relax. But the possibility of sudden danger is always present. Sometime in his or her career, every pilot is tested, as Jim Galt was when flying for an airline based in California a few years ago.
The unscheduled rollovers of 737s that have made quite a bit of news lately. Well, I had one going into Reno. The airplane pitched up and rolled to the right, and I applied controls in the opposite direction, and the airplane continued to roll to the right. So in my mind, I was going to become a folk hero. I was going to roll the airplane until we could sort out why it was rolling. It finally responded to the pilot input to bring it back around to the left instead of continuing around to the right. And the airplane very slowly righted itself from about maybe, 110, 120 degrees of bank. It righted itself back to level again. That was a pretty exciting moment.
I was taking an airplane from Lodges to Kenley, Bermuda, and the anti-icing system quit on the airplane. And there was a moment when the navigator came up and said, well, if it keeps up this way, we're going in the drink an hour and a half short of Kenley. And we called up rescue crews, which couldn't find us. And we descended to try and get the ice off the airplane. It wouldn't leave. So we sat there for about 2 hours looking at an airplane that we did not think was going to make it to Bermuda. It ultimately did. And we didn't have a lot of gas left, but it did make it to Bermuda.
Flight 78 meets the sun. It's time for breakfast.
We'll do breakfast in about half an hour.
20 first class, 56 business, and 163 coach breakfasts must be prepared. Flight 78 flies on, powered by its 2 giant Rolls-Royce engines. Each of these gigantic power plants supply 92,000 pounds of thrust and are as big around as the fuselage of a Boeing 737.
This is a Rolls-Royce Trent engine. It's a 92,000-pound thrust engine that is one of the largest engine thrusts that are out today. The circumference of this engine is larger or as large as the 737 fuselage.
They actually produce more thrust than the Atlas rocket that first put the Mercury capsules into suborbit.
They just use 2 big engines on the airplane rather than 4 small ones. And although people may say 4 engines are better than 2, reliability studies have shown that as far as dispatch reliability goes and as far as in-flight turnarounds or diversions, 4 engines are less reliable because there's twice as much to go wrong.
To power the 777, Boeing and its engine suppliers, General Electric, Pratt & Whitney, and Rolls-Royce, built an engine unlike any before. Engine failures for the past 30 years were analyzed, and every historic weakness in jet engines addressed. At Pratt & Whitney, 22 engines were dedicated entirely to the testing process. Airliners encounter fierce storms, so 1.25-inch thick sheets of ice were fired into the huge turbines to duplicate the most severe ice storms imaginable. Ultra-slow-motion photography showed that the ice sheets pulverized as they hit the blades before reaching the engine. In another test, water simulating rainfall of 28 inches per hour, or a 1 in a billion storm, poured through the blades. Pratt & Whitney's engineers revved the turbine up to full throttle without any malfunction. 22 titanium blades suck in 2 million cubic feet of air during takeoff. But what if a blade tore loose in flight? Engineers detonated an explosive charge at the base of a blade to simulate such an event. With the force of a car hitting a wall at 80 miles per hour, the blade rips into the containment ring around the engine. It bulges out as the blade makes its round, but remains intact. Further tests showed that small rocks and general debris also posed no serious problem. But what about birds, which might slam into the blades while the plane is in flight? A flock of 8-pound dead birds were fired at 200 miles per hour directly into the whirling vortex. Each engine was run at top speed for 2,500 hours, the equivalent of 6,000 takeoffs and landings. The stringent program of testing yielded engines of extraordinary capability. Then the engineers tore them down and examined each part under microscopes for damage and any signs of wear.
And the airplane can fly successfully on the power produced by one engine, even in a takeoff scenario where it's full of fuel, full of passengers, and going from a fairly slow speed halfway down the runway, it still can continue the takeoff.
When we get the airplane and use it as we use it, we're not putting it anywhere near that sort of stress level. So the confidence level is extremely high.
We're 6:37 London time in the morning, and we're about a half an inch away from London.
8.5 hours after leaving Dallas, Flight 78 lands at Gatwick Airport, London.
100.
Doug Joshua makes a flawless landing. It's a credit to Jim and Paul's expert instruction, but ironically, it's one of the last times the captains will touch down in their $100 million baby. The time to hand the torch over to a new generation of pilots is fast approaching.
Super job. Super job. You do good work.
And you're a pleasure to work with, too.
Likewise. We're going to miss you, old farts.
This year, Jim Galt and Paul Hinton turned 60, the Federal Aviation Administration mandatory retirement age for airline pilots. In fact, when the 777 returns to Dallas after an overnight, it will be Jim's retirement flight, his last as an airline pilot.
He's too young to retire.
But many feel the FAA's rule is outdated. Jim's son, Rob, also a pilot, is one of them.
I think that a pilot's physical ability to maintain his medical should determine when he or she should retire.
If physical ability, intelligence, and stamina are the criteria, just months ago, Jim Galt passed those tests with flying colors, and he engaged in a G-3 Force lung-crushing dogfight with his son Rob high over the Pacific Ocean. Who came out Top Gun?
Take it right straight up. Let it zoom a little bit, Jim. There he is.
To a former fighter pilot like Jim Galt, there's nothing more exhilarating than a dogfight. Rob brought the challenge to his dad as a Christmas present.
Fatal mistake. All right. Let him shut up and die like a man.
We engaged in 5 fights, and the score was 3-2. If he were telling the story, I'm sure he would say it was 3-2 in his favor.
The score was 3-2, and I'll let him finish it.
It was really 3-2 in my favor.
Bring some G on now. Take it straight up. Roll. Now put him in the canopy. Top of the canopy. Roll. Guns. Ladies and gentlemen, you saw it right there. We got the kill.
Jim's obviously got the right stuff. But nevertheless, the return to Dallas-Fort Worth will be his last flight for a U.S. carrier. The ups and downs of piloting are not reserved for takeoffs and landings.
It keeps you away from home all the time, a high percentage of the time. Spend a lot of time in hotel rooms and eating strange food, and it gets tiresome. Anybody who travels will tell you that it gets tiresome.
Like many pilots, long absences from home have led to divorces for both Paul and Jim.
It seems like any time something goes wrong, you are on the road. The pipe breaks, the dishwasher won't work, the washing machine overflows, the car won't start. And invariably you get the phone call in the hotel room. There's not much you can do about it.
Airline takeovers, mergers, and bankruptcies can put even an experienced pilot out of work.
I have been through 4 different airlines, 4 different probationary periods, some very, very difficult times financially. At one point in my career, I was standing in line for food stamps.